So now this is a meeting of the Jijang Bosal Book Club, group of people who are reading and discussing the series of books on the subject of the Bodhisattva Ksitigarbha, also known as Jijang Bosal. There's Elizabeth joining us. And this is our, I can't remember how many meetings we've had now. I think this is our sixth meeting, actually. This is the end of our third month. And we will get to our discussion of the Ksitigarbha Sutra, which is the book that we're currently reading as part of the book club, momentarily. But when I first started this class, my original intention was to start each class with the recitation of the Jijang Bosal chanting, which is a traditional way of practice that's associated with Ksitigarbha. And due to laziness and lack of organization and getting, having lots of discussion, which is good, I got sidetracked a little bit, but I want to get back to that. And I figure anybody who makes it this far into the class or who is brave enough to join at this point can handle some chanting. Chanting is good. All right. Oh, anyway, so without further ado, let me see if I can get this. Oh, here we go. Get it over here. Got the chant here. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to mute everybody, including myself. We're going to play a recording of the chant, about 7 minutes long. And the main part of the chant is the recitation of the name of Ksitigarbha in the Sino-Korean pronunciation, which is Jijang Bosal. So a big part of the chant is just saying Jijang Bosal over and over again, which is something that we will talk about as part of this class tonight. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now and play the recording.
Jijang Bosal Bosal, Jijang 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 Bosal. Yorok Chanjanani, Om Baramani Dani Sabaha, Om Baramani Dani Sabaha, Om Baramani Dani Sabaha, Om Shunturjan Om Amoka, Salvadara Sadaya, Shive Om Om Amoka, Salvadara Sadaya, Shive Om Om Amoka, Salvadara Sadaya, Shive Om Sosotegyo Sandarani, Nam Samanda Motanam, Abaraji Harasa, Sananam Danyata, Om Kaka Kai Kai Hum Hum Abara, Abara Bara 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 Bara, Chitta Chitta Chiri Chiri Pada Pada Sanjiga, Shiriye Sabaha, Namu Samanda Motanam, Abaraji Hadasa, Sananam Danyata, Om Kaka Kai Kai Hum Hum Abara, Abara Bara 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 Bara, Chitta Chitta Chiri Chiri Pada Pada Sanjiga, Shiriye Sabaha, Namu Samanda Motanam, Abaraji Hadasa, Sadanam Danyata, Om Kaka Kai Kai Hum Hum Abara, Abara Bara 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 Bara, Chitta Chitta Chiri Chiri Pada Pada Sanjiga, Shiriye Sabaha, Om Janon Om Horo Horo Saya Roke Sabaha, Om Horo Horo Saya Roke Sabaha, Om Horo Horo Saya Roke Sabaha, Om Yang Janon Om Samara Samara Mimara, Charma Jagora Bara Hom, Om Samara Samara Mimara, Charma Jagora Bara Hom, Om Samara Samara Mimara, Charma Jagora Bara Hom, Chakshil Chunyon Gasuji, Dehe Jungsuka Hunjin, Ogonga Yang Bungaye, Monung Jinsol, Pul,
Okay, now, does anyone have anything from the previous classes or in general that they want to bring up before we get started with what I've decided to bring up? Any lingering questions or doubts or complaints or anything from previous classes? Or looks like you're going to.
Kurt, I think I had a question about making.
Yeah.
I think you did answer it.
Uh-huh.
Because it's something that know in our Furnace Mountain Sangha tradition,
Uh-huh.
I've never seen it,
Okay,
where
what's that?
fruit and so forth are put out on the altars.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I think you had mentioned about the leftovers.
Yeah. Yes. So no, that does happen in our tradition. If you go, or at least I've seen it happen several times at Furnace Mountain, especially with the precept ceremony or any other kind of formal ceremony. To
Mhm.
it's yeah. Usually people will bring fruit and cakes and cookies, basically. The Buddhas like Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the Devas and the Nagas. They like fruits and cakes and cookies. You put them on the altar, and then the leftover is so in Buddhism, as far as I know, people don't use the term so much, but we sometimes you don't have to have a word for something, you can do it anyway. But in Hinduism, it's explicitly referred to as once you put things on the altar, and then the ceremony is over, the ritual is over, then you have and then everyone has prasad, which is Sanskrit for leftovers, because we take whatever the gods or the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas haven't taken is left over for us. And actually, there is some. So, and it actually in the Ksitigarbha Sutra, there are certain. If you, yeah, there are certain times when you don't do that. When you don't, you don't consume this. You leave it as offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. But anyway, I mean, does that address your question?
It does, and it makes me just wonder that, hey, if a group of us from Cincinnati are going down for the 16 precepts, and I take a tray of cookies, is it perfectly fine to offer them on the altar, and then instead of just saving them for
Yeah,
the potluck or
yeah.
whatever?
So there doesn't have to be room on the altar, often special tables or whatever are set up. You should talk to who's ever organizing the ceremony. It's always good. No one is ever going to say don't bring cookies unless you're going to a type 2 diabetes support group or something. Um, uh, but you know, uh, uh, just you shouldn't just show up someplace and start piling stuff on the altar. You should make sure that and
Sure.
actually there's probably someone whose job it is to do that you would hand it to if that's going to be done.
Mhm. Sure.
That's usually the way
Sure.
it should be done. Yeah.
I remember a section out of Compass of Zen
Hmm.
where Saint San, wherever he was, had received like a fruit basket from a friend,
Hmm.
someone,
Hmm.
and he had really appreciated that, but he first sent them directly to be put on the altar.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And he had diabetes too, so if you were sending him cookies, that may or may not have worked for him. But anyway,
Mm.
Could I ask a question about the chant?
yeah, yeah, sure, go ahead.
I was just curious. It sounded very similar to like Consum Bosal. Is
Yes,
there like a particular pattern to them
yeah.
that like they're just not to say they're just switching out the names, but
Mhm.
kind of that like because a little bit of it was different. But is it something that's like a standard? Is what I wanted to ask.
There's a pattern. Yeah, there's a pattern, and there's four chants that Zen Master Sung San taught that follow this pattern. The pattern isn't something that he made up out of nowhere. It takes parts and patterns from traditional Buddhist chanting in Korea. And people in Korea, Buddhists in Korea, they do a lot of times when they do get together to do um, what's called Yumbul chanting, and this is something we'll talk about tonight. It's a major topic in much of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Is the practice of reciting the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or reciting the name of a particular Buddha and or Bodhisattva. And a lot of times when people get together to do that, they just repeat the name of the Buddha. So that's part of the Jijang Bosal chant. Jijang Bosal, Jijang Bosal. but there's more to it than that. And so a lot of times people leave out the rest, but and just do the recitation of the name. Zen Master Sung San like to include a nice beginning where you take refuge and have like a beginning part of the chant, and then to recite the names. And then there are 5 mantras that he thought were good to practice after the name recitation. And then at the very end, the thing at the very end, which is also done in Kwanzaa Bosal chanting, is a quote from the Avatamsaka Sutra. It's just a verse praising the Buddha. And so it fits a pattern that comes from traditional Korean Buddhist chanting. It's a little bit more elaborate than what some people do, but it's less elaborate than what other people do. You can make things as complicated as you want. But yeah, they are very, very similar. Okay, now I am going to share my screen now. And this is kind of where we had gotten to in the last class. This, let's see. Oh yeah, okay. So I think this is the last slide that I had in the last class. And, I'm going to actually go into full-blown slideshow mode. Let's see, from the current slide. And then, yeah. All right. And so this is the last slide that I had in the last class. And then one of the things I've been working on since the last class is making a chapter by chapter summary of the entire sutra. And so if we go to the very next, so the very next slide that I have is the beginning of the summary that I've been working on. But the summary that we're working on is also part of tonight's class. But before going any further, oh yeah, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for just a second, just to kind of invite more discussion if people are interested. So what I would like to do is spend next month continuing to discuss the Ksitigarbha Sutra instead of moving right into the next book, which is an excellent book. But do people see the emails or announcements that I sent out about that? Do you have any thoughts, or is that cool with everybody? Anybody sick and tired of the Ksitigarbha Sutra? Which would be very bad. Don't say that if you are. Yeah. So I mean, when I started making this summary, I realized that really once we've kind of gone through the sutra, it'll be good to go back over it again and try to some of the things we saw for the first time, or we can think about things more holistically now that we've seen the whole. Okay, so now I will go back to sharing my screen and go back to all right. So this we will save for next month, going back all the way back to chapter 1. I'm gonna move ahead up to where we currently are. So last week, we meet every other week, so 2 weeks ago, and we won't meet again for 3 weeks because there's 5 Tuesdays in May, and so it'll be 3 weeks before we meet again. I think if I'm doing my math correctly. If someone can, let me see. I checked that before, but yeah, there's another Tuesday. Everybody could probably see my calendar now, I think. Can you? And then this is the 4th Tuesday in May. There's a 5th Tuesday, and so we'll meet again on the 2nd Tuesday in June. Wait a minute, this is June. Yeah, this is June. Oh, wait a minute. Jeez, what am I doing? All right. All right. Here we are today. This is the 4th Tuesday of May. This is the 5th Tuesday of May, which is the 30th. And then in June, we should meet on the 2nd Tuesday of June. When is that when I'll be out of town? It's possible that I will be out of town on that Tuesday. I will definitely send out some sort of a message about that. All right. Okay, so we're still sharing. I'm still sharing my screen. I'm going to go back into the slideshow mode and do the display properly. All right. So 2 weeks ago we talked about there's a whole chapter in the Ksitigarbha Sutra on reciting the names of Buddhas, and it actually lists 19 names of Buddhas to recite, which I actually find 19 to be a very nice round number. It's more than one, and it's way less than hundreds of thousands of millions of myriads, which is the usual numbers that one encounters in Buddhist sutras. And there are sutras that have much longer lists of the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. But we already talked about that last week, so I'm just gonna. It's like when Beth and I are streaming Better Call Saul or whatever it is that we're currently streaming. I often want to go back and look at the last 5 minutes of the last episode that we watched before watching the next one. That's what I just did here. We haven't yet talked about chapter 10. And the title of chapter 10 is Comparing the Conditions and Virtues of Giving. This is the Chinese of the title here, which, let's see, this is this character here is in the Four Great Vows. It means to count things. So one of the, anyway, you can kind of make it out. It's interesting to look at these and figure out how this comes out to meaning. Comparing the conditions and virtues of giving. One of these characters actually does mean giving in here. And the chapter starts out with Ksitigarbha asking Shakyamuni to speak on the giving done by beings in Jambudvipa and the virtues therein. And so it's a kind of innocuous question, but it is focusing on something very important. The importance of the first paramita, which is the paramita of giving. Shakyamuni begins by describing great merits that result when, oh yeah, so this is interesting. He starts off with people who have a lot to give, okay? Kings and Brahmins, and in general, people who are very rich and powerful. He starts off by mentioning them as the givers, and then saying that they should, with great compassion, humility, and a smile. That was worth looking up. So this is great compassion. This is this is a combination of the characters for Karuna and Maitri, or in Sanskrit. Great. This is the character for down and the character for mind. So one way of saying humility in Chinese is to lower your mind. And this is just the characters for having a smile. And so if you are a fortunate person, you should give to the lowest and the poorest. Again, I thought this was interesting to look at the Chinese characters for that. The most low and the most poor, basically, is what this is saying. But you have to be sure, you have to be careful. And this is, so, the Buddha is talking about kings and Brahmins. I don't think anyone here counts as royalty or a member of a priestly class, but anytime you are in a fortunate enough situation to be able to give, it's best to do it with great compassion, humility, and a smile, and be sure to give it to and share what you have with those who most need it. And then after stating that, then the Buddha goes on to say, now you can also get a lot of merit by making offerings to, the Buddhas and the monasteries and the teachers and the stupas and the temples and the usual list of things. This comes up a lot in the Ksitigarbha Sutra and in other sutras. To make images and paint paintings, or to pay artists to make images and paint paintings, or to pay calligraphers to Joe is approving, or to pay calligraphers to write out copies of sutras, and then dedicate the merit to the Dharma realm. This is an interesting phrase that I'm not all that familiar with. These first two characters are the mean pretty straightforward, dedicating merit. And the second two characters, pretty straightforward, mean Dharma realm. Dedicating merit to the Dharma realm, I believe, is being used here, and I'm going to continue to look into this, as just as a general phrase for dedicating the merit of your practice to saving all beings, which and the for the benefit of all beings. And the best way to benefit all beings is to become a Buddha. So you're both dedicating your merit to the benefit of all beings, and also dedicating it to your own aspiration, your own bodhisattva aspiration. Because after all, that is what it means to be a bodhisattva, is to be aspiring to Buddhahood. All right. Oh, and so there's other things. Oh, in addition to just making images and stuff, what about the images that were made hundreds of years ago or 50 years ago that are falling apart, that need to be repaired and put back together? And then, of course, also providing medicine and food, drink, bedding, etc. to old people, sick people, and women in childbirth. These are all mentioned specifically for the well-off. Having taken care of, the well-off, the well-heeled people in the audience, all of you royalty and people who are born into priestly classes. For everybody else, all good men and women should start with planting in the Buddha Dharma a few roots of goodness, even as little as a strand of hair, a grain of sand, or a speck of dust. And specifically says make offerings, but all acts of giving. So offerings usually implies offering to, like we were discussing earlier, putting some fruit or cakes or cookies on an altar, or burning incense, or putting flowers. There's lots of kinds of offerings that you can give, but it's clear in this part of the sutra that all acts of giving are being referred to as well, and then also just as you don't have to be a king or a Brahmin, you can still contribute to or help in the repair of stupas and monasteries and rebinding sutras and so forth. And then this section of the chapter ends with the Shakyamuni Buddha saying to give one is to receive 10,000-fold in return. Again, I thought it was, so this one over here, what is this? Oh yeah, this is the lowest and the poorest. As I was going through this and making this summary, I was just, attracted to certain phrases that I thought looked good in the translation. But sometimes when you see something that looks good in the translation, you want to say, well, is that the translator saying that, or is that the original? This is, and of course, the original in this case is also by a translation by a guy named Siksananda. Siksananda was his name, who wrote the Chinese version of the sutra that we have, translating it from the Sanskrit. I don't believe that the Sanskrit exists anymore, or at least not in full. All right. Let's see. That was chapter 10. Okay. I want to check my time here. Make sure we're doing good. We got 5 minutes. We'll take a 5-minute break in 5 minutes. Okay. I can get into chapter 11. I don't know, is there more than one slide on chapter? Okay. Chapter 12 has several slides. Well, let's start talking about chapter 11. Oh yeah, chapter 11 is one of my favorites. You should read the Jijang or the Ksitigarbha Sutra enough to have a favorite chapter, or at least you should to have some favorites. This is definitely one of my favorites. So there, as the sutra goes along, there are many characters that appear. Of course, first and foremost, there is the Buddha's mother, who is very prominent in the early part of the sutra. And then there's many other bodhisattvas who come, and bodhisattvas and ghost kings and people like that. Here we have the earth goddess, the Prithvi, who in Chinese Buddhism is referred to as the earth spirit, firm and secure. And so there are many, many, many earth spirits, but when you see this particular name, the earth spirit, firm and secure, this is referring very specifically to the Vedic earth goddess that Shakyamuni Buddha called upon when Mara challenged him on the night of his enlightenment. So as Shakyamuni was seated under the tree of enlightenment on the night of his enlightenment, but before, it wasn't yet the night of his enlightenment because he wasn't enlightened yet. But Mara came and challenged him. And in response to Mara's challenge, Shakyamuni reached down and touched the earth. And that's a very, very iconic, famous, one of the most, possibly the most iconic image of the Buddha is him seated in meditation under the Bodhi tree, reaching down and touching the earth. And at that moment, he is calling upon Prithivi, the earth spirit, firm and secure, to give witness to his worthiness to attain the Great Awakening, which she does. And there's many different versions of how that plays out. My favorite version is that in Southeast Asia, the earth goddess is often portrayed as living in the ocean. And so when Shakyamuni called upon her, she rose up out of the ocean and wrung the water out of her hair. And being a goddess, she has a lot of hair. And when she wrung the water out of her hair, it swept away Mara and his demon armies. Anyway, so she's the main character in this chapter, and she says to, let's see, how are we doing on time? We still got enough time? Or should I? Yeah. I'll tell you what. We will stop here, take a 5-minute break, get into what the earth spirit, firm and secure, says, and Shakyamuni Buddha's response to that, and then go on to the next. There's only 13 chapters, and we're doing chapter 11 right now, so there's only 2 more after this. So we should be able to finish that and also have time for some discussion in the second half of the class. Okay. All right. Let's see if I can get to my break menu. Oops, didn't do it. Oh, shut up. Welcome back, everyone. Oh, so I introduced the Earth Goddess, but didn't get to what she actually was saying and doing in this part of the sutra. All right, so let's get into that now. So, oh yeah, this here is, yeah, this is her name. This is the name that I have over here. Okay, so um, the Earth Goddess says to Shakyamuni, so this is what happens in the sutra. Someone will step forth from the audience, bow, and whatever, um, and then either make some statement or ask the Buddha a question, um, and uh, and so here, Prithvi, or Earth Spirit, firm and secure, or the Earth Goddess, says, Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, and Maitreya also transform into hundreds of thousands of forms to guide those in the six realms of existence, but their vows still have an end. So this is what their vows still have an end. So the implication here is that, well, then she says, Ksitigarbha, however, has made these vows to teach and transform all beings in the six realms of existence throughout kalpas as numerous as grains of sand in hundreds of thousands of millions of Ganges rivers. Now, um, you know, are Ksitigarbha's vows greater than the vows? So all bodhisattvas have the same vow. We take the same vows whenever we recite the four vows, which we will do at the end of this class. The four vows are a way of stating the aspiration of all bodhisattvas. Um, so is one bodhisattva's vows greater than other bodhisattvas? And you know, is so the Kwanzaa Bosal is the bodhisattva of compassion. Is her compassion greater than the compassion of other bodhisattvas? Manjushri is the bodhisattva of wisdom. Is his wisdom greater than the wisdom of other bodhisattvas? Um, and Samantabhadra, he is the bodhisattva of practice. He's the practice bodhisattva. Is his practice better, stronger, shinier than the practice of other bodhisattvas? And it's not a contest, but and in this, so this is being stated here, to draw attention to and to emphasize the fact that Ksitigarbha is the bodhisattva who represents the aspiration of all bodhisattvas. And so, in some sense, for rhetorical reasons or whatever, here the Earth Goddess is saying that his vows are the greatest, best of all the bodhisattvas, even better than Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, and Maitreya. Now, she then goes on to describe various ways for lay people to pay homage to Ksitigarbha in their homes specifically. So this chapter actually deals a lot with the lay people and practice that can be done not in a monastery, not in a temple, not in some meditation center, but in so often we go to practice at a temple or a monastery or a meditation center, and then we go home, right? Okay, but this is sort of for practice that you can do in your home. And so for she's an earth goddess, so she's into the earthiness of things, the layout of things. Maybe even, it doesn't say here, but maybe even into feng shui, but it's kind of a feng shui kind of a thing. She says to find a pure place on the south side of your home. So the direction of south is associated with Jijang Bosal in particular. Are other bodhisattvas not in the south? If you go far enough south, are all the other bodhisattvas gone? No, but still, but Jijang Bosal is especially associated with the direction of the south. And so on the south part of your home or on your property, this seems to be assuming that you have some sort of a spread that you can just go out and build a shrine on, which is nice if you have it. Um, and then whatever you have, a little altar, and it doesn't have to be on the south side, um, but wherever you put it, whether it's some beautiful shrine outside your house, or a little table inside your house, or whatever, light some incense, um, sing his praises, recite his name, have an image of the Bodhisattva, recite the sutra, which takes a little under 3 hours if you want to recite the sutra. Um, and anyone who does this, she promises to always protect day and night, protect you from flood, fire, robbery, or any other major or minor calamity or misfortune. The Buddha then thanks the earth goddess and states that because of her, all those who pay homage to Ksitigarbha in their homes will leave the sea of suffering and ultimately attain the bliss of nirvana. All right. Now, chapter 12 is a very long chapter. And chapter 12 has a very interesting special guest. The special guest in chapter 12 is Avalokiteshvara. I've got I've got 3, maybe even 4 slides. Let me see, how many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 slides on this. And I do want to get to chapter 13. This is good. I would encourage people to download these slides or look or watch this lecture and stop it at this point. I'll look at each slide kind of briefly, but I want to make sure that we do get to chapter 13 and that we do have some time for discussion. But chapter 12 is a busy chapter. It's the longest chapter in the sutra. So it starts off with the Buddha emitting rays of light out of his head. Okay, this is something that happens in many sutras. The Orna, which is one of the 32 marks of a Buddha, is this place where light can shine out of his head. And if you want to learn some Chinese or Sino-Korean colors, there's a white ray, there's a jade colored ray, there's a purple ray, there's a blue ray, there's an aquamarine ray, there's a red ray, there's a green ray, there's a gold ray, and then after that there's other rays that are more conceptual, not so much. After emitting all these lights from his special Orna, hundreds of thousands of myriads of millions of rays of great Orna light. After that, he praises Ksitigarbha again for how he benefits beings in the human and heavenly realms. And then Avalokiteshvara steps forward and asks the Buddha to expound on the inconceivable matters of Ksitigarbha. And first, Shakyamuni spent some time praising Avalokiteshvara, especially specifically stating that if devas, nagas, men, women, spirits, ghosts, or any wrongdoing, suffering beings in the 6 realms of existence hear your name, see your image, feel great love and admiration for you, and sing your praises, these beings will definitely not fall back or turn away from the unsurpassed way. They will never be reborn. They will ever be reborn as humans or devas and experience excellent, wonderful happiness. When the effects of their causes come to maturity, they will meet Buddhas and be given prediction. Be given prediction means when a Buddha or possibly Ksitigarbha, he also does this, will then tell you that you will become a Buddha. All right, so so then the Buddha spent some time talking about devas in the heavenly realms who have used up their good karma and are about to die in the heavenly realm and be reborn in lower realms. And if they, it makes a special point of saying if the devas, whether male or female, and so there is a certain amount of attention to being inclusive of men and women, males and females, even gods and goddesses in this sutra. There's also some, some problematic, we're going to get to that later on, references to the status of women, which shouldn't be, it shouldn't be fixated on, but it shouldn't be just kind of glossed over either, I don't think. So anyway, devas, whether they're male or female, they can avoid, they can extend their life in the heavenly realm if they pay homage to Ksitigarbha. And then after paying special attention to the devas, the Buddha goes on to explain that everywhere in the six realms, whenever beings are approaching death, if they're able to just hear the Bodhisattva's name, they will be spared the suffering of the lower realms. And so there's things that come up over and over again in sutra, hearing the name, hearing people reciting. So this is why it's beneficial when someone is either very sick or is actually dying, to recite, to do the Jijang Bosal chant, where they can hear it. They wouldn't want to do it if they were not interested in that. It's not something you want to impose on people. But it is a practice for people who would be welcome to it. Now, at this point, then the Buddha starts talking about increasingly serious levels of practice. Let's see. Okay, and also not just for people who are dying, but also for people who have died. A lot of what comes up from this part of the chapter on is for helping people who have already died, and even for people who may have died well more than 49 days ago. In particular, he recommends. So this is still this. So even though Avalokiteshvara has kind of provoked this, this is still the Buddha talking. If the practice, so the practices that are being talked about, especially, are reciting the name and gazing at the image. So it says, if you can do that for 1 to 7 days continually without retreating from your initial resolve, the deceased will be quickly released from the lower realms. Or if they're already in the human and deva realms, they will experience excellent, wonderful happiness. If you can keep the practice going for 21 days and recite Ksitigarbha's name 10,000 times, then the Bodhisattva will appear in many forms and describe the realms into which your deceased loved ones have been reborn, and can even personally lead you to them. And this is my favorite part. All right. Furthermore, if every day you can recite the Bodhisattva's name for 1,000 times, so you recite the Bodhisattva's name 1,000 times a day for 1,000 days, then Ksitigarbha will instruct the ghosts and spirits who live around you to guard and protect you for your entire life. Your food and clothing will be abundant, you will be free from illness, misfortunes will not be able to affect you or any member of your household, and ultimately Ksitigarbha will place his hand on your head and give you prediction. This is the little the Chinese phrase for a Buddha or Bodhisattva placing their hand on your head and giving you prediction, telling you you will become a Buddha. To say Jijang Bosal 1,000 times, hey, I can do it in 10 minutes. Okay, I can do it pretty fast. But I'll bet the average person could do it in 15 minutes, and at the most 20. But if it takes you 20 minutes to do it, it would with a little practice, you can get that down to 15 easily, and even 10. And the hard part is doing it for 1,000 days in a row, which is almost 3 years. So I'll keep you posted on how I'm doing. When I read this, I thought, wait a minute, that's actually, these other practices are a little bit more, they came before, are actually a little bit more demanding. They focus on, basically reciting Jijang Bosal constantly for like a solid 24 hours, or 3 days, or 7 days, or 21 days. And people do that. People do those kinds of practices, those special retreats. Now they might not do it. They might take 4 hours off to sleep. I don't know what. I actually don't know what the rules are, and I'm sure the rules differ from one tradition to another. But there are people do very serious retreats like that. Reciting Jijang Bosal 1,000 times every day is actually quite doable, at least for me. Anyway, all right, and I just wanted to emphasize here in this slide. You can read more about it if you want to come back and look at it later. There's a lot of emphasis on both very tangible, mundane, worldly things, food and clothing, relief from illness, stuff like that, fire, flood, theft. But there's also a lot of emphasis on developing great kindness and generating the mind of vast great kindness to rescue and guide all beings. Generate vast mind of great kindness to rescue and guide all living beings who wish to cultivate the unsurpassed Bodhi, who wish to leave the threefold world. And he even has a very elaborate ritual for people who have trouble understanding sutras. And if you do this, if you perform this ritual, then Ksitigarbha will appear to you in a dream, and after that you will be able to completely understand and perfectly remember all sutras. All right. And anyway, so this is one last slide on, I think it's one last slide. Yes, it is. One last slide on this chapter. There's a lot of it. There's a lot going on in this chapter. It's very long. This is the only part of the Ksitigarbha Sutra where there is a long verse section. That's very common in many sutras and in a lot of sutras. The Lotus Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, and other sutras, the Buddha will say things in prose and then restate it in poetic form. It doesn't happen in the Ksitigarbha Sutra except in this chapter. It's extremely common in the Lotus Sutra, and the Lotus Sutra is also very much associated with Avalokiteshvara, who is kind of the main subject of this chapter. This is Avalokiteshvara is the one that the Buddha is addressing, and the chapter. There's an entire chapter of the Lotus Sutra that is devoted to Avalokiteshvara, and that chapter also lists a lot of benefits that one gets from calling upon the name of calling upon Avalokiteshvara by name. I just want to go back and emphasize it. Yeah. So the name of this chapter, though, is the benefits of seeing and hearing. So seeing, hearing the Bodhisattva. That's what these characters mean. That's what this chapter is all about. The benefits of seeing images of Ksitigarbha and hearing Ksitigarbha's name. But really, in practice, the seeing and the hearing, you make the images and you recite the name. That's what you're being encouraged to do in this chapter. I went through that kind of fast. I can stop before we get to the next chapter to ask if there are questions at this point. And we are going to continue to discuss the whole sutra. We'll have another 2 meetings on the sutra, so I don't feel uncomfortable, spending some time talking about what we've already gone through. I apologize if I went through that kind of fast. Or I can keep going.
Kurt, here's a thought.
Okay, Joe.
It seems like some of this is transactional. See the picture, hear the name, make the image, and you'll get this. But yes. I am picking up on certain words, do it with faith or so on within the text that change it from just being transactional.
So the very first thing in the chapter on giving, okay, the emphasis on that chapter was on giving and the benefits of giving. And so, to talk about the benefits of giving actually is, kind of for, uh, uh, making giving transactional. What do I get
Mhm.
for being generous? And that's not the point of generosity, obviously. Um, and yet, to those of us who have not completely overcome attachment to self, uh, we still have that mind, uh, and it's still there, and we can't pretend that it's not. Well, we can pretend that it's not, but pretending that it's not there doesn't change it. So, um, uh, anyway, so the transactional is there, but there's always two things. One is the emphasis on the fact that this is all a practice of a bodhisattva, so ultimately it is for the benefit of all beings. Um, and second, even when there is some kind of more, even when you're putting flowers or cookies on the altar, you put the flowers on the altar and you enjoy them. You put the cookies on the altar and you eat them later. Um, but you dedicate that merit, to the Dharma realm. You dedicate the merit, and that's a real thing. Uh, and it and it's real to the extent that you make it real in your own intention.
Kurt, have you heard stories of like deathbed conversions within Asia of people who disbelieved, and then
Well,
once they're going out, they have a conversion and they're fully accepting at that time.
yeah, even in the earliest teachings of the Buddha, and the teachings like the Dhammapada has stories about people who the Dhammapada has, I think it's the Dhammapada, I'm pretty sure it is, has at least one story about someone who uh, was not a good person. Um, I think it was a butcher. Usually it's butchers in the Dhammapada. And he had some sort of a deathbed conversion. And later that day, after he died, the Buddha told all of his students that that butcher had been reborn in, some heavenly realm,
Mm.
because he had just looked at the Buddha and had this, just by looking at the Buddha, had this conversion experience, and of course, so what did the monks do? They said they got mad. We get up every day. We shave our heads. We eat one meal a day, um, and and this guy, that's it. That's all it took for him, right? I mean, and that's literally. I mean, I'm embellishing it a little bit, but not really much. I mean, that's pretty much the way the story goes. The monks got mad, and they said, "How can this be?" Uh, and the Buddha had to straighten them out. Um, so yeah, I mean that happens. Good, Camille. See, you're unmuting for something.
Yeah, I was just curious. Something I've read recently talked about how kind of originally, within text, something that was kind of written was that like venerating the teachings but not the teacher.
Mhm.
And I was curious if you could comment on that for, I guess, what do you think sort of was originally there versus what got added for
Oh,
kind of theistic
mhm.
components as a
Right.
way of communicating it to people as Buddhism moved throughout? And
Uh-huh.
and that's not and I'm just posing that as a curiosity question.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And so it's really interesting to look into that. And I think, we have to accept the fact that what we have in our hands is the production of a lot of human labor. Um, and so, you know, I I tend to believe that the Mahayana sutras were taught by the Buddha, um, but a lot has happened since then. You know, none of the teachings of the Buddha were written down for hundreds of years after, and all schools of Buddhism. Uh, I mean, all schools of Buddhism accept that fact because it is a fact. I mean, and everybody knows that. Nobody has stuff to, and but nobody even tried to. Nobody claimed to write these things down for hundreds of years after the Buddha lived. And so, and when they did start writing them down, a lot of the motivation was because they now had different versions. And so as soon as they were being written down, there were different versions. Um, uh, yeah. So what has been so there's I don't accept the kind of the modern what is to a great extent a consensus among modern Western scholars of Buddhism that none of these sutras were taught by the Buddha, but they were all written hundreds of years later. I don't think that's true. In fact, so the story is the Buddha taught this stuff, but everybody forgot it, and then Nagarjuna traveled down to the land of the Nagas and retrieved them, and brought them back. Except for so Nagarjuna did that, but then there was another guy, Asanga. Asanga meditated for 12 years, and after 12 years of very hard practice, he started talking to Maitreya, and Maitreya taught him a bunch of Mahayana Buddhist teachings. So some people completely discount anything. You cannot really. It's hard to separate the baby from the bathwater in Buddhism if you start trying to get rid of all the supernatural stuff. Theravada Buddhism, which sometimes people try to portray as being completely logical and rational and non-supernatural, is full of ghost stories and demons and ogres and magic and the Buddha performing magic. Okay, and then people will say, "Oh no, that was added later," and it I know stuff was added later. Stuff was added later. Things were edited. Things were changed because even the Mahayana sutras, you have different versions of them. So we know that the different versions come from different people. So we know that we don't have the absolute perfect, unaltered words of the Buddha. And you have to, Thich Nhat Hanh has a wonderful book on what is it? It's called the Sutra on Knowing the Right Way to Handle a Snake. And his point is that people during the Buddha's own time, people who sat at the Buddha's feet, disagreed on the teachings, and so you have to assume that we will. And so it wasn't just they disagreed; there were people who misunderstood the teachings, even people who studied directly with the Buddha. So you have to assume that we will misunderstand things as well. And so, there, whether you think that these sutras were written later or were spoken by the Buddha and then handed down, and maybe some copy editing errors have been introduced or people's opinions have been put in. Regardless, you have to you have one method is to follow the little ritual that's explained in chapter 12 to pray to Ksitigarbha. Ksitigarbha will appear to you in a dream. He will pour water on your head, and then from then on you will perfectly understand all the sutras. But short of that, you have to and anybody who claims that, so maybe somebody claims that, but are you going to believe what they say? I would say no. There's no there's no quick and easy answer to that. So I mean your question was about was more specifically about, were these sutras really taught by the Buddha? Were they written later? I think.
I think something like that was an excellent answer. I think something I was thinking about was just how the repetition of the names has
Yes.
become kind of this way of and to me it interprets or I interpret it as venerating individual, but not necessarily the teaching. But I guess maybe their name is associated with the teaching if you know enough about them. So I guess that's more what I was thinking about, but that's an excellent answer regardless.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and so the business of anytime that people are like repeating a name, they're doing this practice that's called in Korean Yombo, which actually does go back to the time, or at least the earliest teachings of Theravada Buddhism, which is recollecting the Buddha or remembering the Buddha, or actually it's a mindfulness practice, mindfulness of Buddha. Actually, of all the mindfulness practices, of which mindfulness of breath is one, mindfulness of Buddha is the first one. And mindfulness of Buddha is what's called in Japanese Nembutsu, or in Korean Yongbol, Nyanfo in Chinese. Um, I don't know how it's pronounced in Pali, but it's in Pali Buddhism, and so the practices in Theravada Buddhism are you have visualizations or whatever of the Buddha, and so that venerating the Buddha, yeah, it's I think it's legitimate. It's not something that has been added later by people who are trying to make a religion out of it, in my opinion. Well, what do I know? We've got like 4 minutes left. The last chapter is pretty interesting. Joe, do you have something?
No.
No, okay, all right. So the last chapter is pretty interesting. It introduces a new character, Ksitigarbha, or not Ksitigarbha, Akashagarbha. So Ksitigarbha is the earth Garbha, whatever Garbha means. Garbha means lots of different things. It means womb, it means matrix, it means storehouse. So Ksitigarbha is the earth Garbha, and Akasha Garbha is the space Garbha Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva of space, and or the Bodhisattva of emptiness. Actually, it's emptiness Garbha is in Chinese, and so this chapter both introduces Akasha Garbha in an interesting way. It's also kind of wrapping things up because it is the last chapter, and oh yeah, so it does have. This is a repeat of a slide that I already had. This is a very interesting part about the importance of the practice of recollecting a Buddha's name, or a Bodhisattva's name, or a sentence or a verse from the Mahayana Sutras. Um, and so as happens throughout the sutra, there's a discussion of the great benefits that you can receive. But the point really is you should use your spiritual power to skillfully rescue these beings, or these other beings who are just like us. Manifest your infinite forms at the places where they are, shatter the hells for them, and enable them to be reborn in the heavens and experience excellent, wonderful happiness. So this is addressed to Ksitigarbha at ports as things are being wrapped up. This is being addressed to Ksitigarbha as a bodhisattva, and so anyone who is a bodhisattva, this is also so Ksitigarbha he's often called the bodhisattva of great vows. This word vow really means aspiration, and it gets to the heart of what being a bodhisattva is: the aspiration to save all beings. And if you get, if you get some other benefits along the way, and that is talked about a lot in the sutra, then that's not the main point. Oh yeah, so I do have some stuff about Akasha Garbha as one of the great 8 great bodhisattvas. There's sometimes we speak of 4 great bodhisattvas, which is a shorter list, and Akasha Garbha didn't make that list, but he is in the list of 8 great bodhisattvas. And anyway, I don't know what else. We're almost done. Oh yeah, so this is actually not that short of a chapter. In wrapping up, Akasha Garbha asks a question, and in reply, Akasha Garbha asks a question: if there are good men and good women, and devas and nagas who hear this sutra and Ksitigarbha's name, or gaze reverently at and make obeisance to this image, how many different kinds of merit and benefits will they gain? How many? 28 is the answer. Not 42. 20. So in particular for humans, there's 28 benefits, some of which are specifically for women. Let's see. Women, if they wish to, can stop being women. But if they don't wish to stop being women, they could become wealthy and powerful women. Everybody, men and women, gets to be good looking. Um, there's no discrimination there. And then of course there's your protection from illness, flood, fire, theft, um, not retreat from Bodhi. I don't really know the specific meaning of this, but it comes up. But this is one of the benefits of venerating, repeating Ksitigarbha's name. Most of these are fairly, I would say, not so. They're transactional. I mean, if you gain the ability to understand sutras, that's kind of transactional, but it's not like being good looking, right? Okay, I would say it's a step up in terms of how spiritual it is. Always travel safely, peaceful and happy dreams. A lot of people would kill for that. I mean, I don't want to advocate that you kill for it, but I mean, as an expression, but yeah, that's a big one for a lot of people. That your deceased loved ones will not suffer. Your hearts will be filled with kindness and compassion, and you will become Buddhas, right? And then there's another list. Since Ksitigarbha asked about good men, good women, devas, and nagas, of course, there's another list for all the things that nagas, devas, nagas, ghosts, and spirits will get, which is a shorter list because they're already, um, anyway. So that we will continue to discuss this next month, and I think I am going to be out of town on our next scheduled meeting. So what I'm probably going to do, I don't see, actually, it's quite possible that I will have internet connection, so we'll quite possibly be able to do class at the usual time. If it looks like that's not going to be the case, I will record a class to cover some material too. And so basically what we want to do in the next two classes is review and discuss the sutra, the whole thing. I don't know, have you read this sutra, Camille?
I have not. I'm
Yeah.
jumping in.
Okay.
And
Yeah. It honestly, you can sit down, if you sit down and read it, 3 hours. You can do it in less than 3 hours. It's not, which is not bad. 3 hours is a lot to just sit down and read the whole thing through, and I know that's the case because I've read it together as a group with a group of people before, taking turns. It takes less than 3 hours to read the whole thing out loud, and so it's actually not that long as sutras go. There are sutras that are significantly shorter and sutras that are significantly longer. But if you download my slides, I now have a handy summary of each chapter, which and actually I would love it if people would make critiques or ask why some things were left out, or say, did he really say that in that chapter, or anything, any feedback on starts on slide 134. So this is one. All the slides that deal with the Ksitigarbha Sutra are numbered starting with 1, because when we go to the next book, they'll start with 2.
Okay.
Anyway, so now I've talked a little bit over time. Any you haven't said anything, Elizabeth. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Good to hear your voice. All right, so we end with reciting the 4 vows, which I think I can probably find it here somewhere. One of these Word documents I have floating around. You can still see my screen, correct? Sentient beings are numberless, we vow to save them all. Delusions are endless, we vow to cut through them all. Teachings are infinite, we vow to learn them all. The Buddha way is inconceivable, we vow to attain it. May whatever excellent qualities we have gained from this practice be extended for the benefit of all beings. Thanks for coming, everyone, and we will see each other in 3 weeks, if not before. I hope to see all of you actually before then, probably. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.